Welcome to Wine Library TV. I am your host, Gary Vaynerchuk, and this is the Thunder Show, and a very, very special Thunder Show indeed, because we have somebody who is a legend. This guy is the real deal. He is I like to call him the professor. I've never told him that. I keep it in my own mind, but now I'm sharing it with the millions and millions of maniacs out there. And we've got a very special episode today because we have Jeffrey Davies in the house, a gentleman who is a pioneer in the wine industry, and I'll let him tell a little bit about his story in a second to you. And then we've got 4 selections of his that we have here, 3 of which were some of the best of my Bordeaux trip, which you saw footage of, and you probably recognize Jeffrey from some of that film. And then 1 rosé sparkling champagne that, it's that time of year. We're talking a lot about grower champagne and more high quality and stop drinking the junk. And so we'll talk about that. But some really interesting, fascinating stuff here. And really, you will see me at my lowest level, more listening this time than speaking, because when this guy talks, I listen. You should listen. Very unusual episode because I have had these wines in the past, whereas normally, except for the last champagne, in the past 95% of the shows, I don't have the wine. So it's going to be a little bit of a different perspective from that standpoint. But we're here to, he wanted to be on, I wanted him to be on, we're not going to pass on it, and we want to focus on these wines because I think there's some interesting things in his philosophy which are definitely a part of my philosophy, and I think you'll enjoy this show very much. So for all the real wine nerds who always bust my chop, maybe not enough content, this is going to be your show. I'm excited, and I appreciate you on, my man. Thank you.
Pleasure to be here.
Thank you so much. It really means a lot. Why don't you let the Vayner Nation know a little bit about your story, because I think it's a fascinating one, and then we'll start getting into the wines.
As you know, I'm a California native and grew up in the San Francisco Bay Area. I went to school in Bordeaux as an exchange student and then went back and went to the enology school there. I was very fortunate in that the last 2 years that Professor Peynaud taught, I was there. So he sort of took me under his wing and really acted as a father figure to me, and that was quite a treat back in the mid-70s. Dating myself, I know. And I returned to Bordeaux with my wife, who's from Bordeaux, in 1981. And
so was it the girl that kept you there? Was it the girl that sucked you in?
That had a lot to do with it. That had a lot to do with it. And I've been back in Bordeaux now since 1981, so I guess actually I've spent more than half my time in France. Now,
he's giving you the very humble version, but why don't you give him a little bit of the, like how you won all those, awards. This guy was, honestly, there's not even a way to say way cooler at a younger, I get a lot of accolades in our industry because I was very young and did a lot of cool things in my early 20s. This guy was like, just tell him.
Just tell him.
Just tell him. Tell him, especially about that one tasting and the awards. You really achieved a lot of things at a very young age, back when they gave medals and all that bullshit. They don't really do that anymore.
Well, I guess I was one of the first Americans to graduate from the Institute of Enology in Bordeaux, and then went on to work with what was the leading wine publication at that time, Les Amis du Vin. Became
big deal.
Big. Yeah, it was a lot of fun, and it was the only game in town at the time. They were the only people doing then what you're doing on a much wider scale today, teaching people about wine but making it fun.
Sure.
Teaching people about wine values, that you don't have to spend a lot of money to get a good bottle of wine, and that's what we were all about. Am I confused?
Were you working some retail in New York? 67, right?
You're not confused.
See, I got a good memory.
Yes, you do.
When was that? In the time frame?
That was back at the beginning of 77. It's funny because Bernie Weiser hired me then after having met me in Bordeaux for my Bordeaux expertise. And we ended up putting in the first substantial selection of California boutique wines that New York had ever seen back in 1977.
Now think about how scary that is. Think about that statement right there. Mott, pay attention. 1977, New York City, nobody carrying premium California wines. We're talking about not that long ago. And so when we talk about what I believe is happening in Portugal and Greece and and parts, many other areas around the world, and including places within the U.S., Michigan or Virginia, there is potential. It's really about dollars and talent. Really comes down to that. But if people are passionate, there's a lot of places where you can make great wine. But it's just a fascinating thing to me that it's only only 30 years ago that you could not find solid. Forget about, we're not talking about top, right? You were talking about even...
It was jug wines. That's about all there was.
It's amazing. It's not that long ago.
Yeah, and I think the situation has reversed considerably today.
It's true.
I also continued to work with Les Amis du Vin, became the Midwestern director for the club across the country. We organized some of the first wine and food festivals. We call them the Bastille Day Wine Festival. We did lots of innovative things way back when. And we had French wine growers, French restaurant people come in and do functions for us, and it was a lot of fun.
The likelihood, if you've been drinking wine for the last 5 to 10 years, at some point you have had a Jeffrey Davies selection wine. It's very high. I mean, most of the premium wine shops in the country, I can tell you, there was a point where in the New Jersey situation, it was part of a conglomerate that was only able to get his wines, and I struggled when I first got into the industry out of sadness that I wasn't able to obtain some of these wines. Now, it was a business relationship and makes sense. Don't worry, we're not gonna, we got over it. But I understand. Meaning, they were some of the wines that I was really devastated, especially from the Languedoc and Roussillon, and you've been seeing what's been going on in the Thunder Show, and think about how inexpensive and value-driven they were 8 or 10 years ago. But what I'm really excited about, because we don't want to sit and talk forever, is let's talk about the wines we selected. Mott, help me here. Make sure I'm not blocking them. That's good. Let's get into the first wine, and why don't you let them know what we've got here.
Okay, it is one of my premises, and you know this very well, that Bordeaux, while it produces some of the most expensive wines and arguably some of the very best wines in the world today, it also produces some of the world's best wine values today. And I know that's a tough statement to make with the euro-dollar relationship being what it is, but nonetheless, I still think when we look out there at what can be sold for under $30 a bottle that's coming from Bordeaux when it's well chosen, I still think we have a strong statement to make.
I think you remember when I came back from Bordeaux, how much I was screaming about the value. And why don't we tell them about this producer first? This
is a very small property. These are all artisanal wines. There's no industrial strength stuff here. I know you share the same feelings about industrial strength wines that I do. This is only a 2.5 acre vineyard, for Christ's sake. But they're making some exceptional wine out east of Saint-Emilion in one of the really dynamic appellations today. I would say since 2000, this has been one of the most dynamic areas for wine values.
You're speaking of the Côte de Castillon.
Côte de Castillon. And this is on a plateau that runs right through the center of Saint-Emilion and continues on out to the east, almost to the town of Castillon. It's only an 8-10 minute drive away. So we find the same soil, and I know you're very serious about soil. We have thin clay on top of deep limestone. Yeah, I've seen that on TV. Yeah. Yeah. And so we get a very distinctive minerality here from the limestone. We get some richness and warmth from the clay, and we get a very complex wine that can be sold for a very reasonable price. This is the home of merlot too, I might point out.
Sure. This is an 80% merlot, 20% cab franc. It is a $17 bottle of wine, and probably from my entire trip, I know one of the wines I bought the most of. I mean, I completely was blown away by the quality of this wine. 2004, you know what I feel about that vintage, a last of the Mohican kind of vintage. Just the ripeness of this fruit and the freshness of this fruit is obnoxious. And once again, we're in a very interesting time. You're right. I agree with Jeffrey. I think Bordeaux is heavily laden with value. As a matter of fact, I'll give you a little inside sneak. The Christmas pack, which, by the way, Mott, link that up because I think we got a couple of left, if you can see. Just a couple more. But the Christmas pack is very Bordeaux driven because I think people don't realize with the 05 putting such a cloud of expensive Bordeaux wines, how many great wines are out there. Plus, I'm a little bit disappointed by, you know what I feel about ratings. I love to rate wine, but I hate that you would listen to me or anybody else. And I feel like when wines are scored, sometimes people overlook it. I mean, for example, this is an 87-point Parker wine, and I just don't see how that isn't, for me. I just don't, especially from a guy like Parker who loves really ripe and explosive and rich and heavy. To me, this is heavy fruit. How would you describe this wine, in your opinion?
I was just noticing that while you're speaking, I still have the flavor of the wine on my palate. So we have an extraordinarily lengthy finish. I fully concur with you about the 04 vintage. I think it was overshadowed, that's the least one could say, by 03 and 05, and yet here's where the great wine values are.
I agree.
These are wines that are giving immense pleasure right now. I think most of them are going to continue to do so for another 5 to 10 years, but by then I think most of them will be drunk anyway.
Yeah, I think you're right.
I think we get some black fruit flavors here, which suggest excellent ripeness. We get a slight earthiness, the beginning of what we would call the tertiary aromas, where we're starting to see just a hint of truffle, black olive, black pepper. Those are only just beginning, which also suggests to me that this is still a very young wine.
No question. Tannins on the back end are really firm. They really hit your back palate.
No.
And what I like is the subtlety of the oak.
Mm-hmm.
It's there,
Yeah.
but no oak monster.
Exactly.
Are you scared of the?
Yeah, I am. And
You are.
I hate that because it becomes like makeup. And A beautiful woman, like a fine wine, does not need a lot of makeup.
And do you know Lizzie wears no makeup? My wife wears no. I'm all about the no makeup.
Well, there
wow,
you go.
you hit it there.
Yeah.
I like that. I'm stealing that,
Here,
I'm going to take full credit. We're going to redate this to like 2 years from now, so while I use it, I can, I like that. I agree with you. I think that's a great analogy. I'm all about the analogies, as you know, and oak is very much like makeup. I like that.
Right.
That's a good one.
It can be. It can be.
Yeah, that's a good one.
Yeah.
Yeah, don't run away from it. It's tremendous.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay. Anyway, this is a tremendously pleasurable wine, and a wine that I just don't see how, and listen, he's from California, so, there's just not a lot of, to me, what I'm going to do, and I may do this hopefully this week, I'm going to bring this wine out, we're going to taste it against the Justin and the Franciscan, which I've liked, as you know, from California, in the similar price range. Based on how I remember those last two wines, I find this to be a much better version of those wines. Not much better, let me rephrase that. For my palate, much better because it's more subtle on the oak and it's much heavier on the back structure. And when we get into that black olive component, which I agree 1,000%, I almost get, even on the tail finish, a little mix of like leather and tobacco kind of things going on there.
Just starting. Yeah.
Just starting. I mean, this is a wine that I can see 3 to 5 years from now, ripping your face off and you saying to yourself, did I really pay $17? Because quality wine of this nature, in 3 to 5 years, with the way wine prices continue to go up, and don't forget, these areas in the world, they just don't make more wine. It's hard for them. And with the global, impact, it's amazing. I mean, Jeffrey is in the wine business. He can tell you the people want Bordeaux wine every corner of the world. It's the one brand that is always so strong. And with the interest in Asia and Russia on these wines, it's going to be hard to find wine like this in 3 to 5 years at $40, I believe, especially if the dollar keeps doing what it's doing. But even if it evens out a little bit, and then when you look back and see where this wine will be in 3 or 5 years, and you look at a $17 price point, this, for all the people that have wine rooms like you saw a couple of weeks ago, is definitely a wine to put away and kind of laugh. I call this a laugh wine, a ha-ha wine, if I may. Because when you open it in 3 to 5 years, you start laughing at what you paid for it.
Okay, in that context, I would agree.
You have stuff. I mean, I'm sure you pop open wines that you have that were $8-9 from 5 or 7 years ago, and you're like, "Are you kidding me?" Mm-hmm. So great wine to me. This is to me on my palate, 91 plus point type wine. I'm very, very high on this wine. In reminiscing, I think that I like this wine the most of the 3 that we have here. We'll have to see how they act today, but this is a great effort. I mean, tell me a little bit about these people. Are they great people? I don't know them.
The son, that is the owner of this property, is the son of the owner of Le Moulin in Pomerol and Chateau Patrice in Saint-Émilion. So he's a member of the Care family. They've been making wine in Saint-Émilion and Pomerol for years and years. So this is not a new venture to the family.
Sure.
And the daughter, who's married to Emmanuel Care, is a courtier or a wine broker in Bordeaux. So she's got a good vision about what's going on in Bordeaux. Most importantly, I think the wine is made by a very good friend of mine, Jean-Michel Ferrandez, who's done great things at Citron back in the late 80s. He turned that property around. Made a fantastic wine down in Lebanon called Chateau Kefaya Comte de M that we launched together a decade ago. He has a new wine coming down the pike from Lebanon that is extraordinary.
I think I might have mixed up the glasses.
I don't think I have anything communicable.
Yeah, I'm not too worried either. So the team is in place, clearly, on that wine.
And this is also, I think, a good illustration of the renaissance that's going on in Bordeaux, because the first vintage of this wine was only 2000.
Yeah. Well, I picked a good vintage to start with.
Yeah.
Côte de Castillon is full with value. I mean, it's scary. And as I rewind in my mind, in those vintages, 2000, 2001 even, there was like some $9, $10 wines from Côte de Castillon that were rocking.
Yeah.
I mean, I think the hype around that area have lifted the prices, plus with the exchange rate getting worse. So, they're going to start rolling into $25, $26 range, and, it's going to get there.
One thing I've noticed, though, that as the euro becomes stronger against the dollar, all of those wine regions that produce and sell in dollars have not neglected to raise their own prices because they think they can get away with it.
Let's go into this producer. Who do we have here?
All right. Chateau Fizot.
2004.
This is same vintage. This is from very close to Saint-Émilion. In Castillon, we were due east of Saint-Émilion, and now we're north of Saint-Émilion on a south-facing hillside, deep clay soils, some wind-blown sands, 100% Merlot. This is where Merlot comes from. Everybody talks about Merlot in California and elsewhere, but this is where it's from.
Sure.
This is what all other Merlot, wherever it be produced around the world, is measured against.
This is a double deuce, 22 bones, and you like that, right? You should drink some double deuces, right?
Double deuces.
You like that? This, I just think that, this is an area that deserves a lot more attention as well.
This, to me, is interesting for a number of reasons. Obviously, the intrinsic quality and the value, the 100% merlot, but these are very old vines. These were planted back for half of them were planted back at the beginning of the 20th century, beginning of the last century.
Who's the winemaker here?
And this property belongs to a woman by the name of Chantal Le Breton. Her family also owns La Croix de Gué and La Fleur de Gué in Pomerol. So she's been around the block a few times, winemaking-wise. She understands how you work with merlot. She understands how to farm it. She understands when to harvest it and how to make it into great wine. This is all fermented in cement tanks and then aged in oak, about half of which is new. So again, we're not looking to put a lot of makeup on this. It's about half new oak, half one wine old barrels, and all the barrels come over, the old barrels come over from Fleur de Gué. So they're all from a single outstanding
Why don't you
cooper.
give it a sniffy sniff?
Sniffy sniff.
Yeah. I like the rustic quality of the nose. There's a lot of greenness coming through on it, which I like. I mean, you know what I feel about the vegetables. Little
But
celery.
this is not the vegetal quality of an underripe.
No.
merlot.
I'm talking about the subtle aspects of like a celery stick, a little Brussels sprout action that I love so much. I get really sour cherries coming through on the nose as well, which is nice.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you on the cherry quality, and I think that the deep red black cherry quality is pretty typical of Merlot from this part of Bordeaux. This is a wine that has shown that it can age beautifully too. We started handling this back in the 89 vintage. 89 and 90 are still showing beautifully, and I think if you would
Those
put
are probably
this,
like $8, $10, $15,
Yeah.
right?
I think if you put this in a blind tasting with a lot of wines from Saint-Emilion today, which would cost a hell of a lot more, you'd be very surprised at the results.
I like the fruit on this wine. There's definitely an austere kind of back end to it. Still very youthful. 2004, once again, I mean, I'm going to sing about it all day long because I want to save you money and I want to make you like me. I want to be your friend. And so being your friend makes me want to push you very heavily to the 04 vintage because I think there's enormous value, especially if it was already in the country for the last year and a half, sitting at a distributor
Yes.
or a retail level. As the rebuy now is going, it's getting very, very difficult for us to find the kind of values that we're looking for because the dollar has obviously softened so much. But this is a wine that shows a lot of good upfront fruit. On the back end, it definitely becomes tight, to me a little disjointed towards the end, and I just think this is a wine that needs more time. I mean, I'm getting a lot. Tell me about what you're getting on the back end there.
Yeah, you can sense it, and I think already with the color, you see there's a deep, still blackish purple color, which suggests that it's still a very young wine, has yet to unwind. It still has a tight core. I think one of the things that you can tell your viewers that will enhance their pleasure in any of these wines, and in most all wines, is not simply to open the wine a half an hour before they're going to drink it, which is utterly nonsense because there's only
Link up episode 18, the decanting episode.
there's only this much wine in contact with the air.
Sure.
It doesn't do anything.
Sure.
If your customers would do two things when they're drinking red wines, Bordeaux in particular, serve them cool. By cool, I mean 62 to 65 degrees.
Mm-hmm.
If they find that that's a little cool, it's going to warm up in the glass or in the room anyway. But better to start on the cool side. And secondly, if they'll take just 30 seconds, 1 minute to decant the wine into a wide-bottomed decanter, that's going to aerate not just this little meniscus here, but the entire bottle of wine. And their enhancement, their enjoyment of the wine will be enhanced 100%. And also for these tighter cored wines that are still young, it's going to open them right up. You've got the right idea about the glasses here. It's so important to have the right wine glasses. Doesn't mean you have to have a different shape for every wine. I don't believe that for an instant. But you need a wine with a nice bowl where you can get some wine in it, where you can spin it around and let it aerate.
You're about the spinny spin, huh?
I believe strongly in the spinny spin.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah, no matter how you spin it.
That's right.
And I think if your viewers will try just those two simple things, maybe even sticking a red wine depending on their cellar conditions. If they're bringing it right out of a cool cellar, they don't need to do any more than that. But if they have it in a warmer cellar, give it 10 or 15 minutes in the fridge, serve it at 62 to 63 degrees, decant it, put it in the right glass, their pleasure will be greatly enhanced.
If you want your pleasure greatly enhanced, listen to this man. I know, come on. That's all I gotta say. Okay, let's move on to the last wine. And the last one I think is really quite fascinating for a lot of different reasons. Why don't you tell us about the 2002 Bellevue?
Gary, in my mind,
You're pulling something out of
this is a wine that rocks.
the guests are getting very... Are these
This
rocks from the
wine
vineyard?
rocks.
No, these aren't. You took
Every
these?
one of these is from this vineyard.
All right, people are starting to get very creative.
I didn't know which one you'd want to taste first.
Mike, you know what? Let's give these away. So, if right away I'm thinking of how to make this cool. If you'd like to, well, let's see if we like it. But if I remember liking it a lot. Anyway, can I have these?
These rocks are for you.
Okay, and these rocks are now going to be for you. So if you were going to order this bottle, and only please ask for one because there's not a lot, and obviously you may end up with something that looks like this, and then you'll be really mad at me. Anyway, if you'd like one of the rocks from the vineyard, please put it in the notes, and we'll ship it out with the package. Is that cool? We're cool like that. We love them. Anyway, 2002 Bellevue from Haute Medoc. And 2002, is a kind of an interesting vintage because we've talked about that in the past. Of talking about, we were at the Carlisle the other day and talking about the 02, what was it, the Grand Poule Lacoste? Talking about value within vintages that are considered secondary. Tell us what you think about that.
I brought these rocks
That's pretty cool.
to tease you a little bit, but also
How
because
did you get that through customs?
They didn't think they were weapons.
They didn't, huh?
They
obviously don't know you.
Not even of minor destruction. But these rocks are very important.
This is pretty cool.
This vineyard sits right next door to Chateau Giscourt in Margaux. The only thing that separates the two vineyards is a drainage ditch.
A tremendous producer.
And the drainage ditch also is the boundary between the Margaux and the Haut-Médoc appellation. This area of the Haut-Médoc, the southern Haut-Médoc...
This does not have 20% Petit Verdot. That makes me... You know what I think of PV. It has 20? Yeah. I didn't realize that.
Yeah. But this is one of the earliest ripening areas in all of Bordeaux. The only other area that ripens as early as this is Pomerol, the plateau of Pomerol. And yet the soils are totally different. But this is deep gravel. This goes down 40 feet. This goes down 40 feet. So we get excellent drainage.
This is awesome.
We get excellent drainage. We get the reflecting of the heat back up into the vines during the cool nights. I mean, this is very, very unique for the Médoc. The southern Médoc is where you find the deep gravelly soils, as you know, because if you get up into Saint-Estèphe, then we got much more clay.
The funkiness. Love it.
This is also a unique wine, as you point out, because we do have a high percentage of Petit Verdot. And I think that Petit Verdot, as we go on, is going to play an increasingly important role in Bordeaux because of the phenomenon of global warming.
Yes, hell yeah.
Yeah.
I'm a big fan, really, I'm such a big fan of PV, and I want to keep talking about it because this is all being documented. So in 15 years, when everybody's drinking 100% Petit Verdot, I could be like the grandfather of Petit Verdot. What do you think about that?
If you're the grandfather, and I wish you that, then Pinot would be the great-grandfather, because back in the mid-70s,
right?
he was saying that...
Now I feel even cooler.
He was saying that the only varietal that he felt could make a wine on a standalone basis in Bordeaux, and especially in the Médoc, was Petit Verdot. The problem at that time was that we didn't get Petit Verdot ripe but maybe 3 times in a decade.
Right.
Now, through better plant selection, better rootstock selection, and global warming, we're seeing Petit Verdot getting to be quite fantastic. And it's bringing color to the wines, it's bringing acidity that might otherwise have been lacking because of the global warming, and it just brings a whole new dimension to the wine. And we're very lucky because we have some very old plant material here that's over 100 years old, some of the Petit Verdot here.
Tell me about this nose. I mean, you got a little bit of that funkiness coming through. Listen, nobody loves a little bit of dirt and a little bit of, like, sheep bunghole and, like, poopy-poopness more than me. Listen, it's what I smell. What do you want from me?
I'll try to wipe that sheepish grin off my face.
I mean, this is really, very farm-esque. It really, it's got a really, really funky nose.
I think part of what you're getting is obviously the spiciness of the Petit Verdot, and you're also getting, there's another intriguing factor going on here.
Hungarian?
The Hungarian oak.
Yep.
Now, what few people realize is that up until World War II, almost no French oak was used in the aging of Bordeaux wines.
Right.
Because most of the oak was coming from Bosnia, Chechnya, Russia, and it was only after, there you go, but it was only after the Iron Curtain went up, or down, however you look at it, that there was no longer access to those forests. And therefore they started turning and looking at the forests in France, and obviously to the ones you know well, Allier, Poncet, Nevers, and so forth. But now that the Iron Curtain has pretty much ceased to exist, the top French coopers...
Putin's trying to put it back up.
Yes. Now the top coopers have gone back to Russia, and they've also gone to Hungary, and they've found immaculate forests with really, really old trees, 200- and 300-year-old trees, where they can get ultra-fine grain oak, and that's what's been used here. And I think that is one of the elements that gives you a rather unique aroma in this wine.
This is a very, this is a lot better than I remember it, to be honest with you. This is a kind of controversial wine, though. I'm not going to go and scream and yell for all of you to rush out and find this, because this is a stylistic wine. I mean, this is not going to be the kind of wine that you're going to appease everybody with. I mean, it's got great flavor. I mean, I wish we were at a place like that. I think long term, these are the style of wines that people are going to gravitate towards because there are so many secondary and third tier flavors going on this. From an Asian spice, I get pencil shavings for days in this wine. I get the olives, I get the funkiness, I get the manure, I get the black fruit, I get the red fruit. I mean, this is a thought-provoking wine. This is a wine you want to kind of hang out with for a while.
I think so. And again, had we been able to decant it, I think you would already see a certain evolution in the aromas. I think this wine has incredible class, complexity that would rival many classified growth in the Medoc. I think this vintage is going to really come into its own in the next few years, and I think it will leave a lot of 2003s behind.
Well, because the 03s were so hot and ripe and over the top, and you think they're going to hollow out and disappear?
I think some will.
I mean, you know how I always talk about the 03 Bordeaux as the kangaroo vintage because they were very Australian-esque, very hot vintage, explosive fruit bombs, and the American press fell in love with it, and, we're like that. We like instant gratification and a lot of excitement, but the real trickiness is where do these wines evolve as they sit in your cellar. Now, my gut tells me that the 01s and some of the 99s were maybe better versions of the 02 in that realm. However, 02 being a softer vintage in the American press is allowing for some really radical price reduction opportunities. I wouldn't say this is a $70 wine that's sold for $25, but as a $25 Bordeaux goes, especially if you're a fan, and I almost feel like people that are very much into the Loire Valley Reds or Burgundies, wines that have more secondary dimensional flavors and aren't just instant gratification and a little bit more like a crossword puzzle. You got to think about it, This is a wine, for me, who's a big Cab Franc fan, even though there's no Cab Franc, or is there Cab Franc here? No. But for some reason, between the Petit Verdot and the Merlot, it just makes me think a little bit more. It does remind me of Burgundy in some ways. Maybe it's the rocks that are, making me subconsciously think that. But you know what I'm talking about. This is more of a farmer wine that way,
It's a little leaner than some of the 03s that you just talked about.
No question.
But I think with wonderful bright fruit complexity that some of the 03s are not going to have. I thought you called the 03s kangaroo wines because they made you jumpy.
Well, they made me jumpy because I was so happy how much we sold. Everybody was wanting those wines. All right, let's get into the last wine. And really, I think everybody who watches the Thunder Show, look at that.
Perfect.
That's skills.
Perfect pour.
I'm all about the bubbles. And so, really at the end of the day, if I had to do anything, and look, this is I've not had a lot of experience with this, but these just came in.
Right.
And I took them all home and started drinking them. They're good.
This is a small family-owned house. They make
This is the no, this is not Le Gras.
This is Le Gras.
Rosé.
Non-vintage rosé.
And this is a $65 rosé, and obviously, Pinot Noir and rosé-based, champagnes are going to cost you a little bit more. But this was something that I did not have the rosé yet, so I'm pretty pumped. But I had the 2000 cuvée, which I guess they made for the Millennium,
the
which
Cuvée
is
Saint Vincent, which is their luxury cuvée.
Outrageous.
Yeah.
Outrageous.
A couple of things. I'm glad to hear that. There's a couple of things. This is a small family-owned house. They're producing 20 to 25,000 cases a year. Now that sounds like a lot of wine, but in fact, the big champagne houses are producing 2 million, 5 million cases a year.
Tell them, brother. I'm telling you, they're making so much wine. It's like the Wizard of Oz when you go in there.
As you know, this is the only wine region in France where they're trying to actually extend the borders of the appellation so they can plant even more acreage. Not in the best parts, mind you. These are out in the clay soils of the Aube.
Moet and Clicquot and Piper, if they pour it, people are going to drink it. I want the champagne that's got the yellow label.
Currently there are a little over 300 villages in the appellation.
This is so beautiful.
Only 17 of them have the Grand Cru status.
Mm-hmm.
This is Grand Cru.
Mm-hmm.
It comes from the village of Chouilly, which is the largest village just south of Épernay, producing Grand Cru Chardonnay in all of Champagne. There's about 1,000 acres of Grand Cru Chardonnay grown here. And that is the base for this wine, because what has happened here is they've taken Grand Cru Chardonnay and simply tinted it with a little bit of older Pinot Noir from Ambonnay, which is another Grand Cru village.
Mm-hmm.
So we have all Grand Cru wine here, and we've just tinted the wine with a little bit of Ambonnay Pinot Noir to give it this color, and to give it that little raspberry quality that you get on the palate, hopefully.
And the beautiful rose petals on the initial attack. Now, so you're saying this is how much percent Pinot Noir? Do you know off the top of your head?
The portion of Ambonnay wine is less than 5%.
Interesting.
And that's what makes it interesting, I think, as a rosé, because it has the raciness and what we would call the nerveux, the quality, the racy quality that we would normally associate with a Blanc de Blanc or a pure Chardonnay base.
No question about it.
And the rosé is just
It's a laser focused
Yeah.
sparkling wine.
That's a good description.
A lot of times, it gets fat. You remember Photon and Laser Tag? It was huge
Yes.
in the U.S. when I was little. You remember Mott? They had one in 22. And my nickname was Macho Man at a birthday party, and I thought I killed everybody, and we came out, and they had the scoreboard. Do you remember? And I was in last place. Humbling experience, folks. Don't talk trash until you see the final score. That's all I got to say about that moment.
But this spends a
You didn't want to talk more about Laser Tag? Well,
yeah.
we could skip
It's
over.
a wine to die for.
This is really exceptional. Now, do you represent a lot of sparkling producers?
In Champagne, we have always worked with Legras. We launched them in the 73 vintage.
What were you, like
76 vintage.
I want some champagne.
76 vintage. Well, but one of the reasons that we could launch a 76 back in the mid 80s is the cuvee that you tasted, the Saint Vincent, never is released before it's at least 7 years old.
Got it.
This rosé spends a minimum of 3.5 years on the lees before it's disgorged, and another 6 months before it's released.
There's beautiful strawberries, beautiful cherry, not more strawberry and raspberry to me than anything else on the flavor profile. But there's like a rose petal component that I'm trying to, right? Just
You might also notice the
drink up a little bit.
pinprick bubbles, which are the result of a slow, cold fermentation in the bottle. A lot of houses, when they're having to pump out these millions and millions of bottles, accelerate the fermentations. You get the big Coca-Cola bubbles. These are like little pinprick bubbles. They just sort of tickle your tongue as they go.
They really
through.
are tiny.
And where champagne bubbles are concerned, size does matter.
Yeah? Thank God for that. Mott, you want to try it, don't you? Get over here. It's really good. It's real good. I mean, so many people are going to roll in this holiday season and, buy a bottle of Dom P and buy a bottle of Krug and buy PJ. So 65 bones, expensive by every stretch of the imagination. However, by a lot of you who do splurge for this one occasion, it's actually going to be a downgrade in price by $30 to $60 a bottle. And I'm going to tell you right now, very comfortably. By the way, I was a little bit stunned by how good the 99 Dom P was, so I'm not going to pee on that one. But this is way up there and destroys many of the luxury cuvées. And I've been tasting a lot of sparklers over the last week or so. This is way up there. This is a 94 type point wine to me, on my palate. I'm completely blown away by the focus. Really, that's what I get more than anything else. It really breaks down your palate, the mid-palate attack of the flavors. It's kind of like you get the flavors, and then in the middle, it's like really one of those like scary bullets or weapons that people make. In the middle, it explodes, and then finishes off just so smooth, really silky smooth for a sparkling too.
You wanted to serve it at room temperature, which we've done here, and that normally would shoot out all the flaws in the wine.
Which
I
is
don't think you're seeing any.
We were talking about, room temperature. You know what I feel about room temperature. When he was talking about the Bordeaux at the cool temperature, I was like, let me just stay quiet. I respect him too much. I don't want to fight him. But I'm very big on room temperature because really, at the end of the day, I'm immersed in my job, and like anything you do, I'm sure in your line of work, no matter what you do, I know a lot of people who watch a show are in the video game industry, and I'm like, oh, video game, and they're like, yeah. I mean, this, we live this world, and so to me, it's imperative that I know the flaws of a wine.
Sure.
I have no idea how you're going to drink it. It's why I don't decant that much on a Thunder show, because I know the majority, unfortunately, of the people out there are going to pop and pour. Pop and pour. So we do let it breathe for an hour or two on the table, but that's really not Mott, make sure you link up episode 18 so everybody knows my thoughts on that. But I drink almost everything, even at home, even though I should be enjoying them in maybe more ideal conditions at room temperature, because I'm always looking for flaws in the product, because not only the flaws, I feel like I'm getting a DNA shot, I'm really getting to break down the product. But this, and hardly anybody is going to drink it at this temperature. Everybody's going to have it much colder, which is only going to enhance the experience. And really there's no flaws to hide, so I almost can say that you can drink it at room temp. I mean, this is awesome. You should probably finish it off. I mean, it's that good.
Rather than pop and pour, I believe in decant and drink. And I do think temperature plays such an important role in your appreciation. And
How about mindset?
But I think
How about mindset? Before you give me a good compliment, because you're about to say you. And of course that would have been a compliment. How about mindset? While we're having fun, I'm happy to have you on. Do you think mindset, if you're in a good mood, the wine is going to taste better?
Absolutely.
I do too. I'm so tired of people coming here. Somebody down on the floor just a few hours ago goes, I loved it when I was in Italy. Yeah, you were relaxed, you were with your family, you were not worrying about
Didn't
work.
taste the same when I tasted it at home.
Sure, you were looking at the blackberry and worried about the guy. God, I forgot to lock the door. Oh, this wine's not that good. It's just a total mindset.
Absolutely.
Wine is a total life experience. Temperature, mindset, ambiance, everything.
Seasons.
You mean like football seasons? You're right, because I've been noticing the wines this year have sucked compared to last year. I can't thank you enough.
It's my great pleasure.
Please ask the question of the day. The rocks are going to be available, folks, and link up the secret Christmas pack because I want to be in your home tasting along with you on Christmas. But why don't you ask the Vayner Nation your question that you want them to answer? Anything you want. It could come out of left field. Go.
I guess my question would be, why not try decanting the next bottle of wine you serve at home?
Yeah, why not? Because you, with a little bit of me, and this guy established it way before us, we're changing the wine world.